Good morning, everybody, and welcome back. I'm Cami, and we're here in the War Wound Cabin at Foxfire. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching these videos. We weren't really sure what the response was going to be, and it's been great to see you all come back week after week and to know that you're enjoying them. So we really appreciate your support, and thank you for that. Now, I don't know about you, but one of the things I miss most during quarantine is my Saturday morning coffee shop routine. Nearly every Saturday, we would get up in the morning, go down to our local coffee shop and grab a cup of coffee and a baked good. I've been trying to somewhat replicate this on our Saturdays during quarantine by making pancakes or waffles to go with our coffee, but it's just not the same. So I'm trying to find new ways to make it a little bit more exciting on a Saturday morning. So I decided this week I wanted to make donuts. It's been ages since I've had a good donut. So I know for most of you, yeast is scarce right now, and maybe some of you aren't bakers and don't want to mess with yeast. So I found a really simple recipe to make donuts in the Foxfire book of Appalachian Cookery. This is a quick recipe for cake donuts, no rise required, no yeast required. There is a recipe in the book for potato donuts, which requires yeast, and I'll make sure to post that if you're up for a little bit more of a challenge or want to try something different. But today we're just going to focus on the cake donuts. We're also going to make a really easy stovetop jam to fill our donuts with. I love jam, but I cannot get into canning. It is way too much work for me. So I like to find simple ways to make jams or jellies without having to worry about having pectin on hand or being able to can my jars. So this recipe requires no pectin. It's only got 3 ingredients, and that is strawberries, sugar, and an apple. Now, some recipes say you can make this without the apple and you can just put in a little bit of lemon juice for some tartness. I find I like to add an apple because the natural pectin in it firms it up a little bit more. And it's also a great way to use those apples that have gone a little bit soft that nobody really wants to eat in the fridge. So we're gonna go ahead and get our jam started and get that on the stove because it'll take a little bit longer to simmer, and then we'll get started on making our donuts and get those fried up. So the first thing we're gonna do is put our strawberries in the pan. And we're just gonna use about 2 cups of strawberries. That's what I've got left in this bag. Again, cleaning out my freezer here. And then into that, we are going to add 1.5 cups of sugar. It seems like a lot of sugar, but it's really important to make sure you're putting all of the sugar in because this is what also helps the strawberry jam set up. So if you don't put enough sugar in, sometimes it won't set up properly. Then on top of that, like I said, we're going to add this apple, and apples are a natural source of pectin. Like I said, if you have a tart apple, that's even better. Now that our apple is peeled, we're just going to grate it in. You can chunk it up if you want to, but I find that grating makes it mix in a little bit more, so you hardly notice it when you have the final product. So now that our apple is grated and mixed in with our strawberries and our sugar, we're going to go ahead and put this on the stove, cover it, and just let it simmer for a while. This is a small batch of jam, so this is something that doesn't need to be canned. We're going to cook that over medium to medium-low heat. If it starts to bubble, you want to turn it down and make sure it's simmering. You also want to go ahead and start getting your oil heated up. I've put about 1 inch of oil in a Dutch oven. I've got a thermometer on that. We want it to get to about 350 to be able to fry, so it needs to be really hot to fry these donuts. Our oven is still heating up, so we're going to wait a little bit before we get to frying, which is a great time to go ahead and start prepping our donuts. I'm going to have the recipe because I don't need 30 donuts, but I will post the full recipe online and make sure that you just adjust it to fit your own needs. So we're going to start by adding our dry ingredients, and that's going to be 1.5 cups of flour, a teaspoon of baking powder, 1/3 cup of sugar. I'm just going to put a pinch of salt in there, and we're going to sift that all together before adding our wet ingredients. Our dry ingredients are now mixed together, so we're going to start by first adding in our shortening. We're just going to put in 1/2 tablespoon of shortening. You can use any solid fat here, so lard, butter, coconut oil, anything like that. Now you want to do similar to what we did with our biscuits. You're going to work it in with your fingers. This is also a spot where you could use a pastry cutter, or if you have knives or the back of a fork even works. It's not a lot of shortening in our donuts, so we don't have to look for those telltale clumps like we would in biscuits, but we're just going to make sure that it gets worked in pretty evenly. Once that's done, we're going to put in 1 egg, And to that, we're gonna add half a cup of milk. I'm using whole milk. Again, this is one of those places where you can use pretty much whatever you have on hand. We're gonna stir this all together now and get a nice dough out of it. Once you've got your dough all mixed up, we're gonna lightly flour our workspace and roll them out. And then comes the fun part of cutting them. I always like to keep a little flour on hand just in case. Now if you want, you can use a rolling pin here, but I'm just gonna kind of work it out with my hands. We're aiming for them to be about a 1/2 inch thick. I'm gonna use a mason jar today. I don't have a non-scalloped biscuit cutter, so I'm just gonna use the old way of doing it. And since I wanna make jelly donuts, I'm not gonna cut out the centers with the first couple ones. Once we get our donuts cut out, we're gonna start slowly, carefully, so you don't burn yourself, dropping them into our hot oil. You want your oil to be between 350 and 375. And just make sure you keep a close eye on it because you don't want it to get too hot as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and plop this one in there and we'll get started on frying them. They should turn light golden brown on one side and start to float, and then you want to flip them over and make sure that the other side gets evenly cooked. When we take them out, we want to make sure we have a prepared plate of paper towels for them to drain on before we start tossing them in sugar and other good things. So our donuts have been fried, and I did end up making a few donut holes because I had some dough left over. When they're hot out of the oil, you want to make sure you drain them on a paper towel so it soaks up any residual oil, but while they're still warm, toss them in a bowl of cinnamon sugar or sift some powdered sugar on top, or you can glaze them. Makes them extra delicious. Now we want to fill them, and since they're cake donuts, they're a little more dense inside, so we actually want to just poke a little hole in the side with a knife and wiggle it back and forth just to create a little bit of space in there to take some extra jam. I've got some jam in a piping bag here. It's a little runny, but that's okay because this donut's gonna hold it. You just want to stick the tip of your piping bag in there and just start to gently squeeze until you see some of the jam start to pop out. Okay, and then we have a nice jelly-filled donut. So there's a little bit too much in there, but that's okay because that's the way I like it. So I hope you enjoy these and you have a great weekend, and enjoy this with a cup of coffee, and make sure you share it with a friend or a family member. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Happy eating.